And so I say the first miracle is the one everybody wants. That's the one where you've been praying for something and then there it is. It feels like, oh my God, there's the miracle. But the second miracle is really the important one. The second miracle is right now. The second miracle is realizing that the future that you're longing for or worried about, it's not here. It's this vague thing in your head. In the past that you're either complaining about or you're longing to go back to, it doesn't exist either. It's gone. The future and the past, they're in many ways just vague thoughts and visuals and images. The real power and the only thing that is absolutely concrete real is this moment. The more we can be in this moment and realize, my God, this is a miracle. This moment is a miracle. This is the miracle. Then we're empowered to the extent of changing the past out of this moment and creating a future out of this moment. But we got to be in the moment to do it. So many of us, we're just fantasizing about the future or complaining about the past, and we're not in the moment at all. So the real miracle to me is right now.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Joe Vitale with us. Joe is the best-selling author of books such as The Abundance Paradigm, The Attractor Factor, The Key, Zero Limits, Life's Missing Instruction Manual, Hypnotic Writing, and Buying Trances. Joe also was a lead contributor to The Secret, the movie, and is the author of the best-selling Nightingale Conant programs, The Power of Outrageous Marketing and The Missing Secret. Joe, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Been looking forward to the moment. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
I would love to start off with your origin story because it is so compelling and it's just it's mind blowing. So if you could share your little superhero origin story to start us off, I think that'd be great.
Oh, I almost hate that question because I keep having to edit it to make it shorter because it's such a long story. The short version of it is, I guess, I wanted to be an author when I was a kid. And so when I was a teenager, I went through a bunch of different fantasies, and one of them was the decision to be an author. But I am in no way, shape, or form an overnight success. While I was moving in the direction of being an author, I was learning how to write. I was writing. I was sending out articles, even as a teenager. I went on to be homeless. I went on to 10 years of poverty. I went on to a long journey of struggle while going for my dream. My first book was in 1984, and then I didn't have another book for 10 years. And during that time, I was still working, still persisting, still writing, still holding the dream. But again, there's no overnight success in it, not in my lifeline story, because it took decades to get to a point where I started to get some momentum in Houston in the 1990s. I had a couple books out by then. I was learning how to do marketing. People were seeing that I was doing marketing. They started to hire me to do marketing for them. So I started to taste a little bit of success. I was also fortunate because the internet was starting to be a buzz around that time in the mid 1990s. And I wrote one of the first books on internet marketing. It was called Cyber Writing: How to Promote Your Product or Service Without Being Flamed. Flamed was the big word back then. It was the version of being criticized, being condemned, being satirical. You didn't want to be flamed, and that was what people were having when they were trying to do marketing. So I ended up being one of the first internet marketers. I was a very skeptical internet marketer. I was actually one of those who said early on, you can't make money in cyberspace. It shows you what kind of a futurist I am, because I looked around and thought, you're not going to make any money here on the internet. People are just flaming each other and complaining and not really making money. And of course, I was proven wrong because I made money on the internet and taught people how to make money on the internet. And so as I keep growing and going and writing, I was invited to be in a movie that nobody knew would do anything. And I did it because it was a promotional thing to do. It was a new thing for me to do. And I had also learned by then to say yes to opportunities, even when you don't know how to do the opportunity. Just say yes and figure it out as you get to it. And so I was invited to be in the movie. I said yes. And of course, that movie ended up being The Secret. And now, 16, 17 years later, I'm still benefiting from being in that movie because it's made history. It's traveled around the world several times. It's still going around the planet. New people are still discovering it. And when they do, they discover me. My journey didn't stop there, though, because my ever thirsty quest for knowledge kept me curious. And I ended up discovering this Hawaiian healing system that just blew my mind. And I've written several books about it. The very first one was called Zero Limits. And Zero Limits has awakened other parts of the planet. So you have my good fortune in being in the movie The Secret, which takes me to a large part of the planet. And then the planet I didn't reach, I reached through Ho'oponopono, which is the Hawaiian healing method I wrote about in Zero Limits. And then, of course, there's people who have known me ever since I was doing internet marketing, and I've hit that part of the planet. So I've had at least three really great lives, all overlapping and yet going in different directions, and all mine. And I'm not done. I'm 70 and now I'm a musician. I got 15 movie or albums out. I do have my own movie in production. We're filming it next month here in my new home, which I just got to a couple weeks ago. And I have other things on the agenda that I want to do. And along the way, going from a kid who wanted to write a book, I've written 90 books. And I've got another one coming out next year and more in my head. So there's my currently shortened life path story.
That's amazing. So, how did you get hooked up to Ho'oponopono? I love Ho'oponopono. I believe that you can call in Archangel Gabriel to help relay the message of Ho'oponopono to someone that may never want to talk to you again, or seemingly so, and communicate with their soul through the help of Gabriel. You could uh, heal a rift that you have with somebody who's already passed, I believe, using Ho'oponopono. It's just amazing. So, how did you come across this?
Well, first of all, Ho'oponopono is not only amazing, it is miracle inducing, it is mind blowing, it is heart opening, it is the most incredible, simple method I ever came across in my life. And again, much like me being around when the internet came around or the movie The Secret came around and some of the things I was there for, I'm very fortunate that I met the man who was teaching Ho'oponopono, and he liked me enough, and we had enough rapport that he and I wrote the first book, bringing it to the world, called Zero Limits. So, how did I hear about it? The short story there is I had heard a story about a therapist who helped heal an entire ward of mentally ill criminals. And he did it with an unusual method where he didn't actually work with them directly, he worked on himself. And when I first heard the story, I thought, yeah, that's an urban legend. That's not real. That's not true. I have a pretty open mind. I do believe in magic. I do believe in miracles, but that one just didn't ring true. So I dismissed it. I heard the story again almost a year later, and I thought, I meant this therapist does what at a at a what? And he gets these criminals that are mentally ill to get better? And I'm like, what in the world's going on? And then it dawned on me, if there's any truth at all to this story, then that method needs to be brought to the masses. I need to know what that method is to help heal me in anything going on in my life or anything I would encounter in the future. But more importantly, I needed to bring it to the world. And so suddenly I'm on a mission, I'm on a quest. And you got to remember back then, this is 2003 or so, there wasn't anything on it on the internet. I didn't even know the therapist's name. This seemed like a vague urban legend story that somebody made up. There were no facts associated with it. But I started my quest and I even hired a private investigator to look for this therapist. And we did find him. He was in Calabasas, California at the time. And I called him up. I was living in Texas at the time, and I just got on the phone and called the guy. He didn't know me at all, but he was very kind. We spoke for about 45 minutes. His name is Dr. E. Haleakula Hulen. He told me the story was true. He was the therapist at that hospital. I said, what were you doing? He said, I was doing something called Ho'oponopono. What in the world is that? And he told me it was a Hawaiian healing system. And I said, well, how's it work? And he says, well, my only job is to clean. And I'm like, clean what? You're cleaning the windows in the hospital? You're cleaning what? What are you doing? And then he did his best to explain what was almost incomprehensible to me at the time. But he was doing a weekend workshop that weekend or the following. I don't remember how soon, but it was close. I got on a plane and I flew out there and I attended the event. I met him. I learned the basics of Ho'oponopono. The most popular basic formula is the 4 phrases that you would know. And the 4 phrases are, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. That's it. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And the way it was taught is you're feeling whatever you consider to be the wrong, the problem, the upset, the illness, whatever is off for you, you feel it. And then you're saying these 4 phrases inside yourself. You don't say them out loud. You don't say them to another person. You say them inside yourself to your connection to what he called the divine. I've since called it the great something. Joseph Campbell called it the great mystery. That's God, that's Allah, that's Buddha, that's Gaia, that's the universe, that's Napoleon Hill called it infinite intelligence. We got all kind of words for this energy field that's intelligent. And you say those 4 phrases to it. And the request is not to change what you're looking at. It's to change how you're looking. It's to change you. And this ended up being profound. I mean, I ended up writing 3 books. And as I mentioned, there's another book coming out next year. And this is all about teaching Ho'oponopono. I did 3 live events with Dr. Hulen, Zero Limits 1, 2, and 3. And there's video footage on YouTube, and we sell the workshop access and all of that. So I heard a story and I confirmed it was true. And then I went on the quest to learn about it and bring it to the world.
Amazing. That reminds me of The Alchemist and how he kept getting this recurring dream. And it was revealed to him that that was his personal legend. I don't want to. I don't want to spoil the the plot line to our listener who hasn't read the book yet. But I find some synergy there or coincidences with that book. Have you read the book?
Oh, yes. It's considered one of the classics of spiritual literature. So I encourage people to read it. It's one of the top 10 when people list books that changed their lives. The Alchemist is one of those that comes up.
And you know that it took only 12 days for Apollo to write that.
Well, you know, Zero Limits, my first book on Ho'oponopono, took me 14 days. And I'm still in awe of it because I'll tell you, I mentioned earlier I've written 90 books. Zero Limits is the only book I've reread that I wrote. And it's because it felt like it came from another source. It was certainly me. I was the one writing it. But I was so focused, so inspired, and so in the flow that I felt like I was kind of a stenographer for the divine. The book was coming in, I was recording it. And when I was done, it was really 2 weeks later. And if you want to hear a further amazing story, before I turned that manuscript into the publisher, the book became a #1 bestseller on Amazon. Now stop and think about that. I just finished the book. It's not published. The publisher doesn't even have it yet. And the book's a #1 bestseller on Amazon. Now, how in the world does that miracle happen? First, I had written an article about Zero Limits, and that was way before the book. That's how I even got a book deal. I wrote this article, and I did it freely. I passed it out to the internet, and everybody was passing it around. Jack Canfield wrote me one time, and he says, 20 different people sent your article to me. You talk about viral marketing. That article about Ho'oponopono, which was really introducing Ho'oponopono to the world, it was like lit on fire and people were sending it all over the place. Well, when I got the book deal, because of that article, the publisher was smart enough to list the book on Amazon for pre-orders. The book wasn't written. The book wasn't published, but they listed it on Amazon for pre-orders. Well, all those people who saw the article that I wrote that everybody was distributing to everybody else went and pre-ordered the book. The book was a bestseller before I finished writing it and turned it into the publisher. This is the kind of miracles, I was going to say magic, but it's bigger than that, the miracles that were taking place around this. And I really felt like my writing the book, my meeting Dr. Hulen, all of it was guided by what I'll call the great something.
Yeah, not just guided, but kind of predetermined or divinely orchestrated and arranged, probably before you were even born. I would guess that was like a soul contract or some sort of divine assignment that.
Yes, we have free will. And what I tell people is we have free will. We all get these kind of offers, so to speak, from the universe, from the divine. And we're allowed to say no. When I learned about Ho'oponopono, I could have just put up a wall and just said, that stuff's nonsense. I don't want to read about that. And then had I gone through and I met Dr. Hulen and he and I were going to write the book, I could have said, I'm too busy. But I knew I was following that inner guidance that you know all so well, that was really saying, do this. And I wanted to do it without knowing it was going anywhere. I didn't know that this would end up being a movement. I didn't know that I would do 3 events with Dr. Hulen. I didn't know that I'd have my own movie in production about Zero Limits that's starting in a couple of weeks. I didn't know, but I did know I was being nudged to follow through on learning about Ho'oponopono, writing about it, and bringing it to whoever wanted to hear about it. And all I did was say yes.
Well, you've got that sign above you that says expect miracles.
Right.
So when
it's also on my shirt, which you may or may not be able to see, because so many people out there expect crap. And we've seen the bumper stickers where they say they were expecting various versions of crap. And I'm like, come on, let's put out a different mindset here. You get what you expect. So let's expect miracles. And that's how I talk. That's how I end my emails that I send out to people. That's on my shirt. That's on the background here above my books.
I learned a definition for miracle that is just, I think, amazing. I got it from the Kabbalah Center, and it's really profound. So I'm sure they got it from ancient texts or something. And it goes like this. A miracle isn't defined as when the impossible becomes possible. A miracle is defined as removing the illusionary veils that don't allow us to see the light in every experience and moment.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. When people have asked me what is a miracle, since I'm broadcasting the phrase expect miracles to the world, I'll say there's 2 kinds of miracles. There's the kind that everybody's looking for. That's where there's a sudden manifestation and there's a solution to a problem, or something you've been longing for just appears. It shows up in the most miraculous way, much like me getting a phone call for the movie The Secret, or meeting Dr. Hulen, or being in the right place with the internet coming along. And even though I was skeptical, I turned it into something long-term prosperity-wise. And so I say the first miracle is the one everybody wants. That's the one where you've been praying for something and then there it is. It feels like, oh my God, there's the miracle. But the second miracle is really the important one. The second miracle is right now. The second miracle is realizing that the future that you're longing for or worried about, it's not here. It's this vague thing in your head. And the past that you're either complaining about or you're longing to go back to, it doesn't exist either. It's gone. The future and the past, they're in many ways just vague thoughts and visuals and images. The real power and the only thing that is absolutely concrete real is this moment. The more we can be in this moment and realize, my God, this is a miracle. This moment is a miracle. This is the miracle. Then we're empowered to the extent of changing the past out of this moment and creating a future out of this moment. but we got to be in the moment to do it. So many of us, we're just fantasizing about the future or complaining about the past, and we're not in the moment at all. So the real miracle to me is right now.
I learned something from he's a channeler. He's got a popular YouTube channel called Sam the Illusionist. It's got, I don't know, 100 and whatever thousand subscribers. And in this channeling, whoever it was, archangels or Arcturians or whatever, were explaining that the present moment that we think is the present moment is actually in the past. And in order to experience the present moment, you need to shut off the five senses and go within, go inside. Because it's like we're living in an echo. And that ties in with we're just talking a little bit about The Alchemist. Maktub, which is Arabic for "it is written," it's in the Quran, might seem contrary or contradictory to free will. But if you have infinite timelines that you can choose from, where the script has already been written to the movie, but there are infinite number of scripts to choose from, and that's where your free will is in the making a vibrational choice to resonate at a frequency of a new, better script that you're now going to get invited into. You're going to jump to a new timeline. That's my understanding of how this works. But if you want to get in the present moment instead of being in this past echo, which actually is validated by quantum physics and some, I don't know, there's some scientific studies that Ian Mitchell had explained to me that validates there is a lag, there's a delay that in our experiencing of reality. Anyway, so that was really profound for me, and I remember that a lot. I'm receiving information about whatever's happening in the outside world, but it's in the past, and I need to stay connected with the present moment, which is actually in my heart, in my sacred heart center, and that means going inside, and that's where infinity is. Infinity is not out there where the universe goes to its outer reaches, because there is actually an edge to the universe. Infinity, where there is no edge, is inside.
This reminds me that one of the great teachings that I got from Dr. Hulen about Ho'oponopono, he said in any one moment, you're either coming from memory or you're coming from inspiration. He went on to say that 99.9999999, you can go on pretty far with that, we're coming from memory. And what that means is we're doing what we did before. Part of it is because the brain, as brain science is illuminating for us, is lazy. It looks for shortcuts. It looks for hacks. And so if it did something before and you're in either the same situation or what appears to be the same situation or even close to the same situation, the brain goes, well, that worked before. Let's do it here. Most of us, virtually all of us, are doing that. And the great goal of Ho'oponopono is to clean the memory and to clean all of what Dr. Hulen called data, the beliefs, the past storehouse of memories that are in the subconscious and unconscious and even the collective unconscious. Ho'oponopono is to help clean all of that. And what are we doing when we clean all of that? We're getting to a point where we are open to receive inspiration. I really feel when I was writing Zero Limits, and most of the time when I was with Dr. Hulen, I was an open vessel. And so when the idea for the book came, I was available. When the book itself started to more or less write itself, I didn't bring in all the other ways that I've written books before. I allowed it to come through because I was doing all this cleaning to clear me to be a pathway for the divine. So again, Dr. Hulen says you're either coming from memory or you're coming from inspiration. And believe me, I've been all over the world talking about Ho'oponopono. I've been on stages that, I was in Russia, I was in Ukraine, I was in Iran, I was in Poland, in Italy, all these different places. And I often will tell people, because they'll get excited and they'll be enthused about Ho'oponopono and the possibilities of it. But I can see as I'm on stage looking out, they're filtering what I'm saying through their existing belief system, which is based on memory. Their memory is a belief system that is helping them get through the day. So it's helping them survive, which we all want to do. And we can congratulate ourselves because if you're watching or listening to this, you're surviving, your body mind system is working. However, it doesn't allow for the new, it doesn't allow for inspiration. It doesn't allow for the whisper of God or the great something to tell you what the next steps are for you. And I'm always telling people that I know you're going to applaud, you're going to read my books, you're going to really be enthused, you're going to want to tell the world about zero limits and Ho'oponopono, and yet at the same time, you're not going to actually live it until you practice on yourself and do your best to clean up what's between you and the miracle of right now.
Yep. Beautiful stuff. And Ho'oponopono is something that is helpful also with grief. I didn't know this until I read the book Ho'oponopono: Your Path to True Forgiveness. Have you read that book? Are you familiar with it?
Yes. I read all the books that come out on Ho'oponopono, unless it's slipped through the cracks or it's in a different language. I've probably read it.
Yeah. So in the first chapter, in the introduction, the author, Matt, was explaining how his daughter, 6, 7, 8 years old, she lost a friend, a best friend in school. She passed, and the grief was unbearable. She was just not coping. 6-year-old kid, trying to cope with their best friend suddenly not being on the planet anymore was really hard. So Matt used the Ho'oponopono prayer and process to help his daughter go through the grieving process and make peace with this seeming loss. Everything is illusion except for love. So loss is therefore illusion too. But telling somebody that when they're in the midst of the grief is not going to be well received. But the Ho'oponopono process that he used with her was very healing, and she bounced back very quickly, where it would have been debilitating. And two of her other best friends who didn't go through that process years later were still struggling with eating disorders and things like that, because the last time the friends saw her, the girl that passed, it was at lunch and she wasn't feeling well. She went home and she never came back.
I'm sorry to hear that. Let's be clear about something. A lot of people make this fundamental mistake with Ho'oponopono. And it's the big mistake where they think this is really good and I know somebody who's hurting. I need to go give it to them. And what they want to do is share a method. And you can't blame them. We all want to do that. If we find a good movie or a good restaurant or something, we get excited. We want to tell the rest of the world. But in Ho'oponopono, there is no rest of the world. In Ho'oponopono, there's only you. And what you see out there, whether it is a grieving child or there's a war going on in Ukraine or there is some sort of economy collapse in another country, or you're worried about your family, friends, neighbors, boss, worried about your finances, any of that stuff, all of that is experienced inside you. When people learn Ho'oponopono, the way it was taught to me and the way I practice it and the way I write about it, it means you go inside yourself and you clean up your perceptions of what is contributing to what you are seeing. So the difference here is that I don't have kids, but if I had a child and it experienced a death and I saw it hurting, I would be feeling something. probably hurt too if it's my child. I would be feeling something. What most people do is go to the child and say, hey, here's what you need to do, and here's what you can do, and here's how we can resolve this. No. In Ho'oponopono, you do it inside yourself. If you see the child hurting, you don't go to the child. You go to the hurting in you. And as you are feeling the hurt about this apparition, this illusion, this thing on the outside of you, you have to remember the only place you feel it is in you. So if you're feeling off, or you're feeling sad, or you're feeling grieving, or you're wanting to help, all of that's in you. So as you feel it in you, this is where the prayer and the petition kicks in. You now turn to your source, your inner connection to divinity, and you say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. And all of that is a shorthand, as I explained in my various books, for saying something to the effect of, I'm sorry for being unconscious to how I helped contribute this perception and this situation. Please forgive me and my ancestors or anybody involved that would contributed in some way with their beliefs and were unconscious. Thank you for resolving the situation, cleaning up the beliefs in me, known and unknown, conscious and unconscious. And I love you for my life, for the process, for this miracle of now. We talked about the story of Dr. Hulen being the therapist at that mental hospital for the criminally insane. The reason he was able to help them is that he didn't work with them. He worked with himself. All the other doctors, social workers, therapists who had gone to the hospital tried to work with the people directly. It did not work. Those patients were sedated or shackled every day. When Dr. Hulen went there, he noticed how he felt inside himself about what he was experiencing. He then turns within to do Ho'oponopono on himself. As he achieves some level of clarity and peace and moves towards an acceptance of what's going on, the patients reflect his clarity. As he heals, they heal. So this is the big difference, and it's also the big mistake that I see most people make when they hear about Ho'oponopono.
Wow. Thank you for that clarification. That is really helpful. And one thing that pops for me while you're describing all this is a quote I learned from as a Kabbalah Facebook group. And it's a quote from the Baal Shem Tov, a very righteous, holy rabbi from hundreds of years ago. And it goes like this: nothing is by chance. Every single event or experience in a person's life is predetermined and purposeful. So if a person chances to witness the degradation of his fellow, he must realize that he too suffers from the same lack in one form or another. Otherwise, why would divine providence have caused him to see his fellows failing? Obviously, to open his eyes to something he must correct in himself. So even if one is your enemy, and justifiably so, even if his moral and spiritual downfall is one of his own making, it could have happened without your having been made aware of it. That you have witnessed it has nothing to do with him. It is a message to you, enjoining you to deal with a similar negative element, be it in the subtlest of forms within yourself.
You know, there are two new books out right now that are arguing for and against free will. And I just posted an Instagram video about both of them because I got both of them, and I wanted to point out, as I often say, that life is an optical illusion. You get what you believe. So if you want to believe in free will, there's a book called Free Agents, and it's how evolution has created free will in all of us. And it's a powerful book. It's a detailed book. It's a well-researched book, reputable publisher kind of book. By the same token, there's another book called Determined. And Determined argues very convincingly, also with a lot of evidence, also with detail, also with a major publisher, reputable publisher, that you don't have free will. And so I sit here going, well, which is it? Do you have free will or you don't have free will? And as I said in my Instagram video, William James, the father of psychology as we know it, had said he didn't know if there was free will or not, but he was going to act as if there was free will. And his first decision as a free will individual was to choose to believe in free will. And I thought, that's empowering. Dr. Hulen in Ho'oponopono said you have more of a free won't than a free will. And what that means is you are getting inspiration all the time. It's coming through, being filtered through your memories, being filtered through your beliefs. But once it hits your consciousness, you have the ability to say, yes, I'll do that, or no, I won't do that. And so it's almost like you have free won't, not free will. And then, as I've said all of this, I want to point out, you know what Dr. Hulen would call what I just said?
What?
BS. It's all head stuff. It's all mental stuff. It's all taking us away from the moment. It's taking us away from the miracle. It's great if you have coffee with somebody and you just want to argue about whether you have free will or not. At the end of the day, you're not going to solve the equation. You'll choose something, and whether you chose it consciously or unconsciously, you won't even know. So if you can look at all of this as entertainment, then it's probably a little bit better for your well-being. But for Dr. Hulan, I go all the way back to the very first conversation over the phone where he said, my only job is to clean. And I kind of feel the same thing. My only job is to clean. And what am I cleaning? Whatever's in the way of me being here now.
So where do you see Ho'oponopono kind of unfolding in the human population and in the collective consciousness? What's your big vision for the planet? And I'll just share mine in a sentence, and that is simply, I want the entire world to cleave to the Creator.
For me, I believe we're all here to awaken. I didn't always think that, didn't always know that, but now I believe that. And we're here to awaken. And to awaken to what? To awaken to our individual divinity. We are not God, but we are aspects of God, and we have connections to that divine, all encompassing power. We think as little itsy bitsy egoic humans. And so we think small, we risk very small, we live pretty much in a scared way all the time, consciously or unconsciously. We're kind of afraid of the dark, we're afraid of what's around the corner or the next moment or the future. And awakening is awakening to the miracle of now, the power that we can tap into, and the potential for us to have, do, or be virtually anything. I used to say imagine, but now I would say anything we can receive. Anything we can receive. So I think we're all here to awaken.
Nice. I like it. So I noticed your necklace, or you have two necklaces. Are those mala beads?
Both of them are. Both were gifts. This is a string of rubies that was given to me, I don't know, 20 years ago, and I've always worn them. And this is a traditional mala, and these are all Rudraksha seeds. And this was handmade for me based on my birth chart and based on the number of ridges each one of these Rudraksha seeds should have in it. And so the traditional model, like a rosary, has 108 beads. Most of the time, you're touching one and you're doing a prayer. In the Catholic religion, which is how I grew up, you'd be doing, Hail Marys and in the famous one, which I can't think of right now,
Lord's Prayer?
the Lord's Prayer, that one. But because I left the Catholics and I became more of a transcendentalist and then went more into Hindu and spiritual and Buddhist kind of religions, all of these are reminders. And as I touch them, this won't be any surprise to you. I'm saying, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. So now they're my Ho'oponopono beads. And at this point, since I've been practicing Ho'oponopono since around 2004 or 2005, the statements are pretty much the background audio in my head. I used to say background tape, but that dated me quite a bit. So we'll say it's the digital in my brain. And if you see me ever fidgeting with my mala, it's because I'm treating it as a prayer. I'm touching it as a reminder. And then, by now I've been wearing the beads for so long, it's kind of my brand. People expect me to wear them. When I was on Larry King, I don't know, the first or second time, I don't think I had beads on. And afterwards, people said, "Where are your beads?" And I thought, oh, they're expecting me to wear them. So it's become part of the brand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And so did you get a mantra from Like I got a mantra from Amma, the hugging saint, and I got some, the 108 mala beads necklace at that event. Did you get a mantra, or do you say a mantra other than the Ho'oponopono?
It's a great question. Debbie Ford, who was a great author of a lot of books, including The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, she had gotten me a mala from the woman you just mentioned and sent it to me Debbie's gone now, so a very long time ago. The mantra for me is really, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. There are other words that I will use as reminders. One thing most people don't know is that Dr. Hulen gave me a spiritual name at one point. And I knew that some people that were practicing Ho'oponopono kind of had a spiritual name. I mean, I was a disciple of a controversial guru back in the 70s and 80s, and he gave me a different name that's on the cover of my very first book. After that, I went back to my regular name, Joe Vitale. And I went to Dr. Hulen and I said, well, I know you're naming different people. If the divine gives you a name for me, I will accept it. And after some time, I mean, days or weeks, he came back with Ao Akua. Ao Akua. A-O, and the next word is A-K-U-A. Ao Akua. And I often sign my blog posts with that. Nobody really ever asked me about it, but I'm doing that. And I asked Dr. Hulen, what does it mean? And he says it basically means in Hawaiian, parting of the clouds to see God. Parting of the clouds to see God. I immediately liked it because I thought, well, that's really what I'm all about. We part the thoughts so we can see the divine behind them. And so my mission personally is to pay attention to my thinking. My thinking are like clouds. They're just going by. Let's part the clouds, and what's there? The divine, which I've called the whiteboard, and the thoughts are the writing on the whiteboard. So that would be another mantra for me, Ao Akua. And I don't know that I've ever said that publicly. So you have an
Oh,
exclusive
nice. I'll call all the mainstream media. That's awesome.
Right. News alert.
Yeah. So you mentioned Debbie Ford and her book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, which is amazing, and I finally finished it, and uh, just a couple months ago. I had a run-in with the neighbor at the house we were previously at, and she had done all this damage to the landscaping of our place, and she felt justified because the construction crew needed to get to her backyard, and her brother's ex-wife owned the house that we were renting. So she just lied to us and um, manipulated us, and then ran this I don't know, construction equipment through our yard and everything. And then I yelled at her, which is very uncharacteristic of me. But then that got me acutely aware of my shadow, and I had been nudged to read Debbie's book for months. I get a lot of information from above, and I had only gotten 10 or 15 pages into that book in 6 months. So I'm like, okay, got it. This is what I need to do. And the coincidences were amazing, off the charts. Like at one point, I'm halfway through the book and I'm really tired. My eyes get tired from reading. It's Erland syndrome. And I just happen to, I don't know, go to a page well into the back half of the book. And on that very page, there's this thing from Debbie saying, this pivotal moment in my life, I'm in the car, it's North Miami Beach. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I live in North Miami Beach. And she's explaining then further that I'm in traffic in front of Aventura Mall. And I'm like, my jaw had dropped because that was literally 2.5 blocks from where I lived.
Wow. Wow. Nice.
So I know Debbie was helping me on the other side to integrate my shadow finally, after getting so many nudges, after months of getting prodded, and I was procrastinating it, and then things came to a head, and then finally, I start doing the processes, the visualizations that the exercises she has in the book too, and like, wow, this is real. This is legit. I feel like those disowned parts of me are now integrated into my heart and loved unconditionally, and I'm not like judging so much about other people, and the universe isn't sticking a bunch of mirrors in front of me of people that really trigger me, because the trigger isn't there anymore. It's just, I'm everything. I'm fractal. I'm the ocean in a single drop. It's really cool. I love her. I love her work, and yeah, that book in particular.
Yeah, that book changed my life, and I was fortunate enough to know Debbie, and I loved her. I absolutely loved her. And she had her own dark side, which she was very open to in her books, which is one of the reasons she awakened to the reality that not only did she have it, but all of us did. And I thought it was very important because too many people get into the follow the white light and forget that there's the shadow behind them. And that shadow, they don't want to admit, they don't want to look at it, but they got to admit it, they got to look at it, and then they can integrate it, and they can be even more powerful than before. So instead of being disillusioned with some sort of, I don't know, deceiving of oneself, you end up reading something like The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, and you have the awakening that this is you. This is you, and you can own those loose parts, integrate them, and become even more powerful and even more whole. So Debbie did a great thing for all of us by writing that book, and she wrote a lot of other books, and I'm very grateful to her. I read the book decades ago, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to tell you exactly, but I will tell you this. People will often say, I'm doing Ho'oponopono, but I don't know when there's a change. Or I'm doing belief work, which could be any number of things. There's all kind of modalities out there. And I think it's important that we look for our limiting beliefs and delete them. And people will often say, how do I know when I've got rid of the limiting beliefs? Here's the rule of thumb for me. You not only don't have the problem anymore, you don't even remember it. It's gone. So when you asked me about what was the takeaway or what was the insight or the awakening when I read Debbie Ford's The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, I don't remember right now. Part of it is because that was a long time ago when I read it. And part of it was when you do have that awakening about something you were dragging through your life and it's gone, it's very difficult to even bring back a memory of it. It's gone. And I tell people that's how you know when you don't have the problem anymore. If you're still worried about the problem or still scared of the problem or still focused on the problem, you still got the problem. But if you don't remember what the problem was, you know, you're past it, you're healed on that particular issue.
One of the side benefits of journaling every day, writing a gratitude journal to God, is that it's also a place where I can park those things when I do forget them, because by design, we forget things that we're meant to forget, and we remember the things that we were meant to remember. But having the story, the details there to be able to share in a presentation or in a book or in a blog post is really helpful. And people love the storytelling and and hearing that story arc. You know, facts tell, but stories sell. You know.
That's true. Well, you know, my most recent book, as you and I are talking, is a book called Unexpected Kindness. And I didn't expect to write it, and I didn't remember everything that ended up being in the book, not at first. But when Bob Proctor died, he was the grandfatherly fellow in The Secret. He deeply influenced me. There were turning points in my life because of Bob Proctor. When he died, I found myself the next morning writing a story about how he had helped me. And I didn't think too much about it. I thought it was from my healing, and it was just a record of what took place. I didn't even know what I was going to do with it. But the next morning, I remembered somebody else, and I wrote about him. Then the next morning, I remembered somebody else. And for the next 30 days, every morning, I remembered somebody that I had temporarily forgotten who would help me when I was broke and unknown, and when there was no real evidence that I was going to achieve anything. But they helped. And so the book became Unexpected Kindness. And as you were just pointing out, it's a kind of journal, but in my case, I made it so it's available to the world. It's on Amazon and all those places you would get a book or an audio. But Unexpected Kindness caused me to remember the kindness of complete strangers who did not know they were influencing this guy, me, to move in a direction that, in many ways, this to go from homeless and in poverty to this level of fame and fortune, if you will, that's miraculous. I mean, I say it, it's miraculous. But I didn't do it alone. My guardian angels were there. Me saying yes was there. All the lucky breaks were there. And all these people who practiced unexpected kindness, they were there. So by writing it down, I now have it forever.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like you write the books for yourself, and they just happen to also change the world.
I think that's the formula, actually. You write it for yourself because it's something you believe in, something you're being motivated to share. And if everything's in alignment, it could touch a whole group of people. You never know how many. I mean, in Napoleon Hill's lifetime, he wrote all those books, and Think and Grow Rich was a bestseller and touched a lot of lives. But a whole lot more books have been sold since he died in 1970. And some of the books that weren't even published in his lifetime are being published. If you haven't read Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, it was not published in his lifetime. It was published afterwards. It's one of the greatest books ever written in history, Outwitting the Devil. And I'm sure he wrote it for himself, but he had an eye towards this can help people. But whatever, he was too, or his advisors were too cautious, and they didn't allow it to be published during his life.
Yeah, and even his family, after he passed, were too cautious about it affecting his reputation and the family's reputation, so they held on to it for many, many years without publishing it.
Well, Don Green is the president of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. He's the one that pushed to get it published. I interviewed him. I have my own podcast called Zero Limits Living, and I interviewed him not too long ago, and he told the story about how people were so resistant and reluctant. And yet, Outwitting the Devil may outlive Think and Grow Rich and all of his other classic books that he wrote. So I'm glad that it's out there, and it came up for us. So I think we should just tell people, go read Outwitting the Devil.
Yes, and if you could synopsize one key point in less than a minute about it, I would guess it'd be about the drift. But you tell me what would you say about Outwitting the Devil?
Oh, I'd say real easily, Outwitting the Devil is a manual on how to outwit the devil after you realize the devil is your own mind. That's the wallop. When I started reading Outwitting the Devil, I thought he was talking about a devil in the traditional pitchfork and red skin Satan version of an image. And it just made me uncomfortable. And I just didn't get it. And I kept hearing people say, oh, you have to read Outwitting the Devil. So I went back to it and I started reading it. And then it dawned on me, oh my God, my hands were sweating when I realized it. The devil is my own mind. And what he was talking about is how to outwit your own mind.
It's part of your mind. It's the evil inclination. It's the opponent. What Napoleon wrote about in there of the drift, like the complacency, like, oh, I'm not going to really, it's okay. I don't need to do that. I don't need to make good with that person. They'll forget. It's fine. That kind of slow burn of, kind of being asleep is where the opponent wins. It's my understanding.
Outwitting the Devil. Well worth the read.
Awesome. So, where do our listeners go to learn more and grow more from your amazing teachings and wisdom.
Well, thank you. I'm not hiding. I'm all over the internet. My main site is mrfire.com, MRFIRE. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and those places as Dr. Joe Vitale, DrJoeVitale. And I do have a $3 massive promotional offer where people can get a lot of my material for $3. I think it's zerolimitsmethod.com, zerolimitsmethod.com. And then finally, I've written a lot of books, but if you go to Amazon and type in Joe Vitale or Dr. Joe Vitale, they'll come up. And we talked a lot about zero limits and Ho'oponopono. I think the book people would want to read is the very first one, Zero Limits. 10 years later, I wrote At Zero. Recently, I wrote The Fifth Phrase. And then next year will be a book called Zero Limits Living. They're all on Amazon or will be.
Awesome. Joe, you're a light in the world. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for revealing your light in this episode too.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored.
And thank you, listener, for listening. And go be a light in the world for others. And we'll catch you in the next episode next week. Take care.